Welcome everyone to the Sioux Falls City Council informational meeting. Today is the 11th of October, and welcome to people here in the audience and also to those watching via other means. We will go first to our City Council open discussion. Anything for Councilor Staley?
I'd like to talk about something, I guess, as long as we're all together here, and this is the only time we can discuss things openly. But just to find out how we handle things, Friday I got an email saying that there was going to be a meeting on Wednesday concerning the railroad relocation and the parking ramp, and it was going to be this next Wednesday. And there were some times on there, and I teach on Wednesdays. I have my teaching schedule arranged. I leave Tuesdays open for City Council business. And I'm just wondering what are, the mandates that if we're told there's a meeting outside of that time, are we going to get an ethics violation if we don't go? Or, what expectations do we have?
I would think that you would, and please correct me, anyone, if I'm wrong, that I'm sure that Darren Ketchum would be, I think he's running that, would be very happy to set up another time if he knew that there was a conflict in that. All you need to do is write back to him, and he would be very happy to set up another time that would be convenient for both of you.
So, but we're not, so we do have a little flexibility when there's we're not expected to drop everything. Especially if it's from a Friday to being there on a Wednesday. I can't really rearrange students at that time.
Not a problem at all, I'm sure. Nope, not a problem. Okay, thank you. And that would be about any meeting. I mean, if you're not able to make it, you're not able to make it. I mean, you've got other responsibilities too, and like the rest of us do, and sometimes we can't even make it to a meeting. I mean, one of these meetings because of that. So it's just, work with the people that are there, and I'm sure they'll be happy to set a time up. That's about any director, or any of the directors. Any other open discussion? I'm going to remind people right now that next week we will be meeting on Monday, not Tuesday. We generally do that for the Chamber of Commerce annual meeting, and so we're looking forward to both events, both Monday and Tuesday. So plan on being here on Monday, let's see, 17th? The 17th instead of Tuesday. Okay, we have three presentations here today. First, public safety software, Chief Sedaris and Chief Burns, and we look forward to having this. Thank you for being here.
Thank
Chief?
you, councilors.
I can just say Chief now. Both of you work. So.
Police Chief Matt Burns and Chief Sedaris and I are here today to brief you on two upcoming software purchase items that will be on the City Council agenda for your approval within the next week or two, we anticipate. As you know, we've been working on this for a while. The Minnehaha County Sheriff's Office, Metro 911 Communications, and the City of Sioux Falls began discussions in the summer of 2015 about a replacement software system for dispatching calls, records management, jail management, fire records management, and mobile reporting capabilities. The current New World public safety software system is being revamped by the vendor and will no longer be upgraded. The City of Brandon has since come on board as a participant in this as well. All of the agencies listed on the slide have been using the New World system since it was installed via purchase in 2004.
We're tag teaming this. Fire rescue is also in need of software solution systems that will manage our information, resources, records, and the interfaces needed to quickly and safely respond to emergency safety-related calls for service to citizens of Sioux Falls. The process of the vendor selection began with a review of current business practices and vetting of the necessary requirements needed for the new software system. Each of the agencies involved in the project offered up their daily challenges, which led to the creation of three main objectives needing to be met by the new system, when those are listed in the slide. After a thorough review and examination of the needs requirements, two requests for proposals were released. One to meet the needs of law enforcement activities, and one to meet the needs of fire rescue management, fire rescue records management activities.
The process of vendor selections began with a review of the current business practices and a vetting of the necessary requirements needed in the new software system. Each of the agencies involved in the project offered up their, Jim covered that, my apologies. The product selected for the new law enforcement business activities, which serves the needs of all 4 entities in some capacity, includes modules for computer-aided dispatch, records management, corrections management with the jail, and a mobile interface. Addition of more modules as we go along is part of the system and can be accomplished.
Along with law enforcement, fire rescue also selected a separate software for its records management activities, which are crucial to meeting both our accreditation and our ISO 1 certifications. The mobile feature will offer access to functionalities for all our records management systems on a tablet or laptops in the field, offering a higher degree of flexibility, and we're now moving into that laptop configurations.
After reviewing proposals from vendors for both law enforcement and fire rescue and participating in an on-site 2-day-long demonstrations, Zirker Technologies was selected to provide the law enforcement software system, and Zoll Data Systems was selected to provide the fire rescue records management system. Zirker Technologies is a company that has its roots right here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Initially started by Michael Zirker, the company was purchased by TriTech earlier this year. TriTech is a leader in software for public safety systems and covers every facet within the incident response workflow.
For fire, Zoll Data Systems will be used, it's currently being used across the country. We were actually down in Omaha and saw their fire department using it. It is a leader in simplifying and maximizing business performance for first responders, critically for when we're looking at EMS. Both implementations will begin immediately following the contract approval. The law enforcement piece was a little bit more complicated with many interfaces with other systems, so that process will be up and running and probably take just over a year.
At this point, we're looking at implementation for the law enforcement side between fourth quarter of this year and first quarter of 2018, and for the fire rescue side between the final quarter of this year and the first quarter of 2017. Again, you'll see the outline cost is approximately $1.9 million, but this is shared proportionally across the participating agencies within this who use the system. Is there any questions for either of us?
Okay, I saw her hand go first.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you. This is great stuff. Can you talk about I mean, without going into too much detail, I guess, because it's proprietary, but it seems interesting or odd that you would go with 2 different vendors. Can you talk about the strategy behind that?
That's a great question. We actually talked about that at length. Currently, Zoll is one of the few that provide the EMS fire records management. Zirker doesn't, and there's not a lot of companies that provide that fire rescue management component that we need. That's why we had to go to a second vendor for that product. Otherwise, ideally, it'd be nice to have one, but we're finding out one doesn't have all the necessary components that we need.
So when you talk about the computer-aided dispatch, then
Correct.
Will you only dispatch out of one of them? Or if I work 911, I'm going to talk to you on this software and you on that software?
No, great question. The computer-aided dispatch is one component that will do all the dispatching. What the Zoll product will do is allow us to pull information out of that to use for our fire records management and our accreditation and records and reporting. We'll tie into that with an interface. So they're, in essence, 2 separate programs, but they all work off that CAD, and that CAD is that key component that does all the dispatching part of it. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
This is, I guess, piggybacking off of Councilor Erpenbach's question. The first is, can the 2 softwares talk to each other, and do they need to?
Yes, they can talk to each other. There's an interface, I believe, that's already been built by the Paramedics Plus folks to do so. And yes, they do need to talk to each other, but that is something that the interface will take care of.
Okay. And then the $1.9 million, is that just software cost?
No, that's the whole package. Again, that's software implementation, kind of like parts and labor, if you will, as an analogy. And again, that's split up amongst the various entities. That 1.9 is not the entire cost to the City of Sioux Falls.
So I guess what I'm getting at is there also going to be required hardware upgrades or purchases like iPads, servers, laptops, and is that a part of this, or can you use what you have?
Right. No, it will be on its own new servers. It's a different type of setup with different software that runs it. But that is the cost. I believe it's in entirety for the whole system.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I'm going to go over here. Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. So just a couple of questions. What is our share for the city then out of that 1.9? Maybe you said it and I missed it.
I believe it's about 1.1, but I do have Tom Huber. Yeah, about 1.1 for the city.
Okay, and then if I can ask another question, please. Curious, I'm assuming Paramedics Plus was fine with this. Did they have any input in it, or is it, and it talks to their software as well?
We looked at theirs too. They currently use the Zoll platform that we'll be using. And there's already an interface already built, so we'll be on the same platform, which will offer Fire and Paramedics Plus to be looking at the same patient records and comparing the same amount of data, which will help for quality assurance and quality improvement.
Wonderful. And then one last question. I know we've talked about Lincoln County, and they already went ahead with their software. I don't know what they purchased for software, but there's been some concern, I guess, as far as who responds to what when you get past what area, and how does that work? So with this software, how does that relationship with Lincoln County look like, and how does that work with Lincoln County?
Sure, that's a great question.
Loaded question.
No, not at all. In fact, this is the software system that Lincoln County had purchased previously. So this actually, if the will is there and things will be worked out, this actually increases the possibilities and to be able to collaborate with Lincoln County because the software would be complementary.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilor Starr.
Actually, that answered my question. Thank
Okay,
you,
thank you.
Councilor Erickson.
And that was a question that I had also. And so I would encourage you, now that you know this, to get a hold of the 911 service and the fire and whatever down there, and tell them what's happening so that you can take a look at possible collaboration at this point. They might be thinking completely different if they knew the software was the same.
Will do.
Okay, appreciate it. If you could give us all of us an email back and see what happens with that.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much, guys. Chiefs? Okay, next on the agenda is a report on audit of construction manager at risk, which you all have in front of you. Mr. Oaksall.
Rich Oaksall, Internal Audit Manager, and we're giving you the executive summary, so to speak, of the Construction Manager at Risk Audit Report. This was discussed at the last Audit Committee meeting and was reviewed and approved. And I worked on this audit myself and prepared a little PowerPoint. Usually I don't do that, but for this we did. So we'll go through that. Construction Manager at Risk delivery method isn't used very often. It's been used a few times in the past. For example, this building that we're in right now, the Carnegie Town Hall, 15 years ago when we did the renovations, they used this method. 6 years ago when they did the Great Plains Zoo improvements, we used the CMAR delivery method. And it's become very commonplace in local and state governments across the United States, say within the last 20 years or so. This internal audit focused on the city's use of CMAR for the Denny Sanford Premier Center, the Midco Aquatic Center, and the new City Services office building. We had 4 objectives. We wanted to determine if the city has processes and controls in place to help ensure that the change orders are properly approved, the GMP, or the guaranteed maximum price, is not exceeded. Number 3, the specified quality of materials and construction is being received. And lastly, that when we're selecting the most qualified contractor, that we're using a competitive and fair process, and it's in accordance with leading practices. So the city uses DBB most often, which is design, bid, build. Probably 98 or 90% of the construction contracts that the city lets are used with we use the DBB method. The CMAR is used for large, complex building projects. Contractors selected on the basis of most qualified. It's not on the lowest bid as it would be for DBB. In the CMAR, the contractor is hired early in the design process and provides pre-construction services. The contractor then transitions to the general contractor status when the construction begins. In the DBB, the city hires a design firm to design the project, and then we solicit bids. We award the contract to the lowest responsible bidder, and the contractor has no input on design and functions strictly as the general contractor. So as part of our audit work, we did quite a bit of research. First of all, I interviewed executives from local construction firms that offer CMAR services. And then I further consulted numerous sources for information on the advantages and disadvantages of the two methods, and those sources are in the very last page of your report on Appendix 5. And I won't go through all the advantages and disadvantages. There's a lot there, and it's on page 2 and 3 of the audit report. There's quite a few of those bullet points there. The question really comes down to, when you look at page 4 of the report, does CMAR save time or money compared to DBB? There's no definitive answer. Nobody would venture to do an experiment where you built two identical buildings using both methods, and that still wouldn't give you an answer. That'd be a sample of one project. So there really isn't a definitive answer on that. Certainly, from my research and talking to executives and construction companies, most builders would argue that having the contractor involved early in the design process will tend to hold down costs. However, that opinion is not unanimous. There is some evidence from constructing school buildings in Florida that CMAR is less expensive. That's the bottom of page 9 of the report. I came across some research on that. Primarily, the reason that DBB was more expensive was lawsuits. If there wasn't a lawsuit, then DBB was typically a little less expensive than CMAR, but once in a while you'd have a terrible result and there'd be lawsuits and that would drive up the cost but certainly that's a small sample too. It's certainly not conclusive. The other question, does CMAR result in greater quality than DBB? The city staff and managers that I talked to were convinced that it does based upon their experience using this project, using this delivery method with the projects they are involved with. Also, the Construction Industry Institute, the CII, did a study, and it suggests that the quality of the CMAR project is higher than DBB. That's on page 4 of the audit report. However, not all construction builders would agree that it delivers better quality. So it's a matter of opinion. It's certainly not a settled issue. Let's look at the audit results. As far as change orders, they were properly approved. That's on page 5 of the report. We looked at I think there were 15 change orders for the Denny Sanford Premier Center. And then we looked at I think there was just a handful of change orders for the Midco Aquatic Center. They were all properly approved. They didn't use the usual process of having either the city engineer or the mayor approve it, depending on dollar threshold, and then being on the consent agenda for the city council. The city council, by resolution, had approved a process whereby city staff and officials could approve the change order and execute the change order, as long as the total budget for the project was not exceeded. So that was approved by resolution, and that was both for the Aquatic Center and for the Premier Center. So the process was changed. They followed the process. There's no irregularities there. So let's look at the GMP. The GMP, the guaranteed maximum price, was not exceeded. The final GMP for the Denny Sanford Premier Center was about $101 million. And at the time of our audit work, that we completed the audit work about midsummer, the Aquatic Center was at about $22 million. And by the way, for people listening or watching, the ribbon cutting will be tomorrow for the Aquatic Center, and then the grand opening will be Thursday of this week. As far as the audit objective number 3, the quality of materials and construction, essentially it's the same process used by the city for DBB or CMAR. It didn't really change dramatically. Number 1, the city hires and pays its own testing firms. It isn't the CMAR that hires the testing firms and pays them. We independently hire the testing firms that we want to hire, and then we pay them, and they do the quality control checks and the testing. For example, the concrete strength, or doing the soil testing, or the equipment testing, that sort of thing. Number two, the city always assigns qualified staff from the engineering division to these projects. And then number three, certainly the Aquatic Center and the Premier Center used a weekly walkthrough to identify problems early, and it was, the idea was to find problems early before they became big problems. So there'd always be a weekly walkthrough with the, the project manager from the city, somebody from the engineering division, from the architecture firm, and from the CMAR. So we'd have that to ensure quality. And that's on page 6 through 8 of the report for all the details on the testing firms and what kind of tests were performed. Lastly, selection of the contractor. Since we don't use the lowest bid, we have to have a different method of selecting the most qualified contractor. And so we did research it's on page 8 and 9 of the report of what are the leading practices that we would expect to see for selecting the most qualified contractors. And certainly the city was using most of those leading practices. The one thing they had not done was use a formal no conflict of interest policy at the time, having the selection team members sign something officially saying they didn't have a conflict of interest. That has been corrected in 2016. Going forward, the city does have a formal process now. But pretty much we were using the leading practices. Most of the executives from the local building companies I talked to, they perceived the process as generally fair. They had a few suggestions about it. However, that opinion was not universal, and we'll talk about that shortly here. We had one audit recommendation on page 9 and 10 of the report. We're suggesting that the city engage the services of a construction audit firm for construction projects of the size and complexity of the CMAR contracts entered into by the city. And this hiring such a firm would not replace the role of project managers, accounting staff, the architects, internal auditors, et cetera, who monitor the cost. What a construction audit firm does is that they're specialty auditors. They're hired by owners, whether private or government, to when the project is wrapping up, they will go to the contractor's office and look through all the documents supporting all the charges. They're looking to make sure that everything was billed according to the contract and there's sufficient documentation to support all those charges. And so that's what we're suggesting. Management agreed with that. So as far as conclusions, we didn't see any evidence that this delivery method was discouraging competition from bidding. However, it's true that only a few projects use this method, so again, it's a small sample. We did include information in the appendix, I think on Appendix 4, about the number of contractors that we had in 2015. I think the average is about 5 contractors using DBB. For the event center, we had 5 contractors propose. For the aquatic center, we had 5, and then for the new administrative building, we had 3. So pretty much in line with what we saw in 2015 for all the construction contracts we did. So we didn't see a lot of evidence that the method was discouraging contractors from bidding. That was something that we heard when we were doing the research for this, that there is a feeling out there that doing CMAR is going to really reduce the number of contractors that are interested in proposing. City management and staff are very satisfied with the results of CMAR projects with quality, and they believe it's at a reasonable price. So they think it's a good delivery method for these types of projects, the large, complex building projects. As far as the risk, there's a risk that you could have a poorly written contract, especially if the city was perhaps inexperienced with these type of contracts, that we might enter into a poorly written contract that might favor the contractor. We mitigated that risk by hiring the Tegra group to help us. They helped us with structuring the contract, making sure that the management fee that was being charged was reasonable. They did a lot of other services besides that, but certainly that was the way the city mitigates that risk. Now, the city needs to be very sensitive, though, to the perception of favoritism. We didn't see there's any evidence that there's any sort of corruption or favoritism going on, but certainly the perception could be that maybe the diversity of the selection committee wasn't very great. And we did list that information in the report about who was on the selection committees for the various projects. So certainly the city needs to be very sensitive to that perception. There's no reason to certainly question the personal integrity of any of the selection team members, but I just want to make that point. We put a lot of detail in the back of the report. Appendix 1, as I said, we list all the proposers for the 3 projects that were the subject of this report, and then also who the selection team members were. Appendix 2, we had a breakdown of the amounts paid to M.A. Mortensen for the Denny Sanford Premier Center, so you can see what they earned for that project and who the subcontractors were and what the subcontractors were paid, and then an explanation of what general conditions are. And that typically is a large amount. It can be as much as 10% of the total project, and also what the management fee was, exactly what they were paid. Appendix 3, we had similar information for the Midco Aquatic Center. Of course, at the time we did the audit, that was not finished, and the project won't probably really wrap up financially until maybe a year from now. Even though we'll have the grand opening, there will still be some pay requests coming in for that project. So Appendix 4, as I said, we had the number of bidders for all the 2015 city construction contracts. You can see an example of the range that we have on a typical construction contract and what the average number of proposers or bidders are. And Appendix 5 was simply the list of the sources we consulted. So I'm here to answer your questions, and we also have Public Works to answer any questions you might have on this delivery method. So.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Neisert.
Something you said, could you just clarify? Did you say that there were resolutions passed for each of the previous construction manager projects in terms of not bringing forward change orders?
Yeah, that was done by, I think I referenced the resolutions in the report. But certainly, yeah, there was, resolutions 85-11 and 114-14. So that was in 2011 and 2014. The city councils at that time approved resolutions authorizing the construction manager at risk delivery method, and they authorized city officials to, quote, enter into, execute, and deliver amendments, change orders, and change directives which do not exceed the authorized project budget. So that was done formally.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the perception of favoritism. I think that is, as you study the construction manager process, and I've looked into it quite a bit, there's a lot of transparency for the owner, that being the city, because they're in the room and they're helping to select, the subcontractors that are awarded.
Yes. So should a design bid build, and management would point this out to me, design bid build, the city is not in the room when the general contractor is deciding who's going to be the subcontractor. They never know, the city never knows how much the subcontractor gets paid or why they were selected. Much more transparency with CMAR. There's always a city representative in the room. The CMAR is not required to select the lowest bid on the subcontracts. They almost always did. But certainly the city is there. They can ask questions that they can't force the CMAR who they're going to
So there's, and so looking at, there's a lot of transparency for the owner. Now, there's maybe things that we could do for the citizens just to, whether it's a monthly report or something like that of bids awarded or something like that.
Yeah.
Because it's the perception, I think
it's more perception than reality. I don't want to slander anybody and say they're corrupt or favoritism's going on, but certainly I think it's a perception issue, and we need to be sensitive to that. But certainly there is more transparency with CMAR. We certainly know what the contractor gets paid. We put all that information in the report. With the DBB, you have a lump sum. You don't know what the profit was for the contractor. We don't have a right to know that. That's just the way it works. Okay. Certainly. So,
Councilor Staley.
So, Rich, we are getting this report here just to kind of educate us. We're not going to have this coming before us for making a decision about this in a project, because with the administration building, it's already been decided.
It's been decided. Yes, that was authorized to use that delivery method, and I believe Henry Carlson is the contractor. Is that correct? Yeah, so
So-
Henry Carlson is
okay.
the CMAR for the new administrative building.
So we don't have any projects that would involve this on the horizon right now,
I can't answer that question, I don't.
that we've been informed about.
Yeah, I think Darren will have
okay.
information for you about that. so.
Then the construction audit firm, I think that's wonderful. I think the more we can do audits of departments to let the public know that we've got oversight, I think that's really fabulous. People want that. When we have that company coming in, are they coming in from out of town?
An audit firm, a construction audit firm?
Yes.
Are you talking about? Yeah, if the city hires one, they would likely come from out of town. I know there's at least 2 national firms that I'm aware of that do this nationally. And they usually, they may not even come to Sioux Falls necessarily, because if they did, say, somebody like Mortensen, their office would be in Minnesota. So they would go to the CMAR's office, wherever that might be, and then they'd give a list of documents that they would expect to see before they arrived. And then they would go through all the documents, and that's the way it works.
So they don't necessarily, we aren't bringing an auditor from out of town coming to actually look at, to do an inspection on what's going on?
No, they don't get involved. They're not inspecting the quality of the material or anything. They're looking at the charges you were charged, make sure that all the charges were properly supported according to the contract documents.
Like that financial statement audit that we do across the
Yeah,
board in
yeah,
our city,
yeah,
where they're just
yeah.
doing a superficial audit.
The city, during the construction phase, we are hiring our own independent testing firms like Geotech and many others to do, for example, the concrete strength. For the Midco Aquatic Center, we have a testing firm that comes in. They independently test all the equipment to make sure that equipment is performing at the specified parameters. So that the CMAR is not involved in they're not hiring a testing firm to say, yeah, all the concrete is the proper strength and all the equipment works properly. The city is hiring our own testing firms during the construction to do that, and we get the reports, and we pay the testing firms.
Okay.
So the construction auditors would be looking at those monthly pay requests, see that they're properly supported, that we're not overpaying, that there's proper documentation, that we're not being overcharged, for example, on something like that.
One more question. So when you're talking about selecting the most qualified contractor, what, to me, that seems like it could be somewhat of a vague.
Yeah, well, the RFP process, when we solicit those requests for proposals, we give them a detailed list of these are the things we're looking for. This is the format we expect your proposal to look like. This is the weighting of the various factors, for example, experience and that sort of thing. Councilmember Kiley, you were on the admin building.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to comment on that, but it's fairly detailed process.
So but there's like a checklist of things that
Well, there's, and first of all, there's a panel of individuals that are selecting the construction manager at risk. And we receive all the proposals, and that, depending upon whether it's with the architect and engineering, we had a stack that was almost a foot high. With the construction manager at risk, it wasn't quite as large, but there were a number of companies that we reviewed, and they are asked to specifically submit following guidelines. And so that's one of the things that I did as an evaluator to see, number one, how well they can just follow those basic instructions of submitting according to the guidelines. But it is very detailed. There's a lot of qualified individuals in there to help you along with providing the information. They are very well represented as a company, and you are allowed to ask as many questions as you would like. And in many cases, you then have that ability to compare, for instance, the technology that one brings and the other does not. That can help move the project forward with the greatest amount of effectiveness and efficiency. So I was very impressed with the process.
And then you score those individually.
Yes.
Right, and then
yes.
they average the scores.
Yes.
And if there would be somebody if there was an outlier, I was told if if everybody rated one company the best and you had somebody else that thought they were the absolute worst, they would, you know, that'd be an outlier. But you try to.
We did score them individually, independently of the other committee members, and it was a very time-intensive process. So this counselor might think twice before he gets involved in another one, but it was worthwhile though.
Councilor Staley, anything else? If I could add to that, just maybe to help a little bit, I know a church in town that built a building a number of years ago with this audit situation. And what happened was, and this was no discouragement or anything on a contractor, but that when they dug a hole for a basement, they piled all the dirt in one area. Now, usually what they do is they will carry that dirt away and bring some back, maybe leave a little bit, bring some back to backfill and that kind of thing. Well, the pile sat there, and when the whole contract was over, they charged the church for hauling all that dirt away and then hauling it all back for backfill. And it sat right there in a pile the whole time.
Yeah.
And this was standard operating procedure, I'm sure, so they just automatically did that, but they caught it, and there was a credit back on the situation. I'm sure that's the kind of thing that the auditor is kind of looking for.
For example, there's equipment rented by the construction manager at risk, you know, the scaffolding and whatnot. And they'd probably look, there might be something in contract language that they can only charge, you know, so much according to a charge sheet or those all those details. It gets very complex and very detailed, and these construction audit firms do this kind of work constantly. They know exactly what to look for. They know exactly what documents they want to see before they show up, and they can probably do it in a few days if all the documents are there.
Councilor Kiley, did you have something else?
Yes, and again, this is a review of the process, not necessarily a review of a specific project. In reviewing the process, you did look at a number of projects. But that was not the intent.
To make sure, for example, the GMP was not exceeded. How do we ensure it doesn't happen, and how do we approve the change orders, that sort of thing.
Right, and once again, from this audit, you determined that all the change orders were properly improved, and in no case did they ever exceed that guaranteed maximum price.
No.
Contractual
and we had discussion too when we had the exit meeting, and even with my staff when we were reviewing the report. Are we going to confuse people? Because when we hear the term guaranteed maximum price, the original GMP I think was $99 million, and all of a sudden at the end it's $101 million. But yes, you can have changes with CMAR, but it's typically owner initiated. We want to, you know, staying within budget, of course, we want to have some enhancements, and so we're willing to pay more. So that might raise the GMP. It might sound like an oxymoron. Well, you had a guaranteed maximum price. Why was that? Why do you have change orders? And you certainly have change orders with DBB all the time, just because of unforeseen conditions. GMP gives the owner at least a little bit of security, knowing, okay, I know this, say, event center is going to be $99 million. That's the GMP. But if we decide we want to have some enhancements and we're still within budget, we have that option to do that. So.
And the other point that I'd like to make about the guaranteed maximum price, the GMP, that if it's not realized, any savings remains with the city.
With the city.
It's not that it automatically goes to the contractor, that if I can cut here, here, and here, and come in $5 million under budget, that I get that extra $5 million. That's not the way it works.
No, we don't split the savings, and
paid out, period.
And we keep the savings, and certainly that CMAR at risk, they're at risk. Now they're probably at low risk if they're a smart company. These aren't. These are intelligent people. When they're giving you a GMP, they're pretty sure they can build the project for that price.
Right, and that's the other point too, because if they do exceed it, they are the ones that are at risk. They are the ones that pay any overage.
Yeah.
Okay, and I agree with Councilor Staley. I think that engaging the services of a construction audit firm is good, especially with the complex projects that may be involved, to ensure that we are paying for materials and services that are actually performed or used. Yep. And it is good to see that our city staff agrees with that as well, too. And then the other point that I had brought out when this was originally presented to the audit committee was the design, build, and bid process, that the CMAR process offers greater transparency, as you had mentioned, over the design, bid, and build, in that the subcontractors are open, as it states on page 10 of the report. They're opened by the CMAR in the presence of the city representatives. So we do have city representation when those subcontractor bids are open, and the CMAR does have final authority on who's selected as subcontractor, since the contract is between them and the subcontractor. However, the city can ask questions of the CMAR as to why that low bidder did not win the contract. And as you stated, in almost all cases, the low bidding contractor has been awarded the work on the city CMAR projects. And I'm assuming, and you can qualify or clarify this for me, that if the low bidder was not accepted, then it was deemed that they were not the best party for that particular part of the project.
I think that'd be fair to say, yeah. And also, if you look at Appendix 2 at the top there, when we're showing what Mortensen, the work that they performed and what they got paid, they actually self-performed some of the work, or just a little tiny portion of the work, just because none of the subs bid on it. It was that demolition of a portion of the convention center. Nobody bid on that, so they self-performed the work. It wasn't a big amount compared to the total project. And also on the aquatic center, on Appendix 3, if you look on page, I think page 19 of your report, Sioux Falls Construction is the CMAR. Blacktop Paving is an associated company, and so they did some of the work. Blacktop Paving is part of the Journey Group, which is part of Journey Group is encompassing Sioux Falls Construction, Blacktop Paving. But they had to bid on that. They competed with other subcontractors for that work. And Sioux Falls Construction competed for work for the cast-in-place mezzanine and the rough carpentry by means of sealed bids. They were the low bidder. They also bid on the steel erection and the finished carpeting installation. However, they were not the low bid, and they awarded the work to Fegan and Daniels Construction. So in some cases they were bidding, and they decided not to award it to themselves because they weren't the low bidder. So,
thank you very much.
Councilor Silbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being here, Rich.
Yeah.
Councilor Neitzer might have touched on this. I'm just trying to make sure I got this right. So in the one section where it says most executives from local building companies perceive the process as generally fair, however, the opinion was not universal. Did I hear right? So favoritism and transparency were the main concerns of the people.
The concern was that certainly the appearance of favoritism, and that's always a disadvantage, whether that's being done here in Sioux Falls or anywhere else. You're not selecting the low bidder. You're going with the selection committee. So then it's a little more subjective. So there could be that perception of, they're just going to give it to the company they like the best. Mm-hmm. So that's certainly the perception. So,
okay.
Councilor Starr.
Please, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rich, one of the things that you mentioned during your report was talking about lawsuits and the ability that different projects, in one of these projects at least, we had some legal matters that happened. How do you account for that as when you're comparing the cost of the building, and where do those expenses fall? Do they fall within the project? Do they fall outside attorneys?
Yeah, that settlement, that global settlement issue on the siding, that was it was a combination of a reduction in the GMP, and then there was a lump sum check. So and it added approximately $1 million when you put the two together. So that's. But certainly, when the report was referring to the case in Florida with building the schools, DBB was usually cheaper than the CMAR, except when there was a lawsuit, and then it was like things were spiraled out of control. It wasn't just a siding issue, and then they settled. It was probably some lawsuit that went on and on and on, and attorneys were paid and that sort of thing. I imagine that's what happened. So,
in this, in the case of the event center, were attorney fees Was it internal
Well,
attorneys, or did we use
we
as
used
part
our-
of the South Dakota Assurance?
The only expense that I found, and I put that in the report, is that we hired an outside expert to come in. The, let's see, that was on page, I can find it here. The page 8, I believe. So our city attorney's office handled that. As far as I know, I didn't see any other expenses, but we did hire a partner from the Judd Allen Group in Minnesota to come to Sioux Falls. That was in, I think that person came on June 4th and 5th of 2014. They met with the city representatives, they looked at the issue, they reviewed contract documents, familiarized themselves with the situation, and we paid them just under $5,000 for those services. And basically, we had them on retainer if that situation had ever gone to court, to litigation. Then those, obviously, the costs would have gone up. We would have had to pay the Judd Allen Group. I think we would have had to pay them more money. So basically, we were paying them that $5,000 for somebody to come here, understand the situation, and then just be on standby or a retainer in case something happens. So that's the only expenses I saw as far as legal costs. I didn't see any other legal firm that was involved with that case.
Perfect.
As far as I know, I mean.
Counselor Neisert again?
Yeah, so one more follow-up, getting back to the favoritism thing. And the reason I asked about that is I think, when citizens have some issue with this process, that is one of the issues, is that perception.
The perception,
So
yeah.
Are the list of bidders for each of the subcomponents, is that public record?
For the subcontracts?
Yeah.
I can't answer that question. Mark, I'll let you. Yeah,
So-
if a citizen wanted to know who the subcontractors were that bid for subcontract work, I mean, we can tell them who won the award, but as far as.
Certainly, there's a process when you go through best value that you're taking the proposals in. So like in the case of the event center, Mortenson's the general contractor, and then he may take 5 bids on steel erection. Then we're going to go through a best value selection process, which cost is one factor. Local is another in the case of the event center, because we wanted 85% of the workers to be local. And what we defined local to be was in at least driving distance of 1 day. So there could be a firm out of Watertown ultimately get something. We would still consider that local because that's still within driving distance. Their safety record, their financial status, the ability to actually get a bond. So we had 5 kind of key pillars every time we selected a subcontractor. In some cases, the 4 firms in that case that don't get the bid, they, having that be public would probably be through Mortenson. Mortenson always said, if someone wants to see at the end of a project how a particular sub was paid, more than happy to do that. But in some of those proposals, there's some intellectual property that some of those subcontractors that didn't get the work may not want any of that released. And so I think it would probably be on a case-by-case basis. But if the question just in general is, who are the 5 contractors that bid on the steel erection, I don't see that as any particular issue, but we could certainly investigate that further.
So to clarify a little bit more, very specifically, what if it was asked so that as each sub was bid, let's say plumbing package,
Sure.
that it would be released who the bidders were, what they bid, and generally what your weighted criterion were, and of course who was awarded, knowing that the person chosen may not be the low bidder. Nothing of their what they submitted, anything proprietary, just bidders, amount, who was awarded, and then just your 5 criterion. And again, this isn't because I think that anybody's hiding anything.
Right.
There's a lot of transparency for you. It's just that it's a citizen perception. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, in general, I don't see any issue with that. It is a very transparent process. The key with getting the 5 plumbing proposals in, and then to actually go through the oral interviews, and that's why in Public Works we divided, there was about 22 different schedules of work for the event center, and Shannon Burhay's here, he was one of the 3 that took, say, 7 or 8 schedules of that work and was intimately involved in that particular selection. But one of the things that comes out is that you first get the document in paper from each of the 5 plumbing contractors, and then you have to make sure that everyone looked at the project complete. And so you may see a proposer B was low, but through the oral interview process, we identified that they missed a significant portion. And so some of those, again, when you're going through best value selection, sometimes the cost doesn't tell the full story. And so if you just stood up the 5 plumbing contractors and their number, that may not be reflective of really complete apples-to-apples proposals. And so that's the only reason I caution in that we really learned through the CMAR process that it is very good for the GM, the city, and the proposer, because at the end of the day, Mortensen in that case had to deliver the project for us. And there could be a proposer that didn't, just in general, overlook sheets 99 through 112. And their bid didn't reflect that. But if we're asked to produce the names and the numbers, it may not be complete, and it may not ultimately be fair to those proposers.
Sure. So if I just see that summary on a sheet of paper and I don't have all the information, I may draw a conclusion that this was 100,000 less. Why did the city not give it to this guy?
Right.
But I may not have all the information to know that there was.
That's
Okay,
further, they may have a high accident rate, which then put them out. They may not be as financially strong, capable. I mean, the electrical contract alone was, I think it was upwards of $10 million. It's, some of these contracts, we were very fortunate to find a local contractor to do that work. But anyway, there's just so much more to it when you go through any bid, but especially best value selection when you're looking at about 5 key pillars. Cost is only one factor.
Okay, thank you.
I have one thing, if you would be there. I know we talked a lot about transparency. One of the things that would be nice, that would have been nice, and I know that the change orders are public knowledge, basically. We can get them, kind of after the fact. I'm wondering if it would be good to have the council made aware of those, just as an informational thing as they happen.
Okay.
On the next building that we're doing. That way everybody knows about them. And it's not that they're a surprise or that they're wrong or anything like that. Those are the decisions that we said you guys got to go ahead and make. Somebody's got to make those decisions. But if we knew that, for instance, that we saved enough money to do that diamond polishing of the floor, and it costs this much, but it's still well within the limit, would have been nice to have known about that. So just an idea for you on this next one.
Understand. Thanks, Counselor.
Okay, Counselor Stevens.
And I would say I think that's a fabulous suggestion, because at the end of the day, we're the ones responsible for the purse. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Thank you very much, Rich. Good job. That was a big one, I know.
It was a big one.
And it was very important, though, also, and you did a great job on it. Thank you. Next on our agenda is Mr. Starr, or Counselor Starr, has a presentation he'd like to make about the, I still call it the Merc. We'll call it the Smirk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you don't mind, I'm going to stay at my seat here to do this. I'm going to keep it relatively short because we've had some interesting changes and some things that happened just even in the last week of where we're at. So if you don't mind, I'm going to start with where we're at with the Sioux Falls Ice and Rec and not use the acronym, and then I won't mess up the Merc and Smirk and that part of it. But the Ice and Rec Center, if you don't mind. In the last week, we toured the facility with staff and had a chance to walk through the building, take a look what its current uses are and what's going on with the building and the condition that it's in. To use a well-used phrase in the council and in our city, is the building is very tired. It's surpassed its useful life considerably. I think some of the assumptions that we made after the tour, after we talked a little bit, those of us that went on the tour, that the city's probably not going to be using this facility as an ice rink anywhere in the future, and it would take considerable remodeling and time and money to do that. Again, the building's tired and need probably to be torn down and rebuilt. One of the things that came out of the tour that was interesting is that the chillers or the ice-making equipment and the Zamboni need to be repurposed if we don't use that facility as a hockey facility. They're in great shape. Parks and Rec Department has done a good job of making sure that the equipment is mothballed correctly and winterized so when that time comes to repurpose that. One of the other things that came out from the tour for me is that Parks and Rec is estimating that to operate a single sheet of ice would cost somewhere close to $250,000 a year to operate as a standalone piece of ice. Obviously that would be offset by rentals, memberships, and usage, but it would still be a considerable amount to do that as a standalone. And I think the Shields Iceplex people in that group has said that if we did do another sheet, that it would of ice would make most sense to do it at the current facility for them, because it allows them to do larger events, larger tournaments, and have a more of an economic impact to the community. So where we're at and where I see we're going is that the next steps really are an appraisal of the property. In addition, in the last week, we've had additional partners come forward in the human services area that really want to discuss some other options for the facility. Collaboration at this point would be a good start to have a plan to move forward if we're not going to use the facility as a ice arena. Director Ketchum from our community development department came forward this week and really wants to help lead taking a look at all the options for the community. There are many human services needs. There are other units of government that we may need to take a look at that might want to be part of this process. Director Cooper from Planning, Director Cerny from Parks and Rec, and Director Turbeck all want to be part of that process. So again, it's putting that partnership together that benefits the citizens of Sioux Falls. My vision in this whole process was making sure that we took a piece of property that the city owns and making it useful for our community. And one of the things that is most important to me is that we take a look at the need that we have for human services and housing, especially those that have been offenders that are struggling to find housing, especially those with violent sex or drug crimes. I've been looking at not only the Glory House, but how we operate the Safe House in our community, looking at the Bishop Dudley, how that fits into the process. One of the things that really stood out to me with the Glory House is that 97% of their clients have substance abuse diagnosis or of some sort, and 65% of those suffer from mental health concerns. Access to ongoing recovery and case management is so important in what we do, but including employment services so that people are able to turn their lives around. They're able to do responsible living lifestyles. As a city, we're already struggling with workforce development as where to put low-income housing. And as a city, we are also spending lots of taxpayer money on law enforcement and other social services due to the revolving cycle of offenders. For me, the solution for this piece of property really is looking at long-term housing for offenders and close to services that research suggests is helpful when working with the complex need of offenders. The housing in an appropriately zoned area overcomes many of the NIMBY syndrome, the not in my backyard things. And really importantly, the housing needs to have an expectation of drug-free and crime-free lifestyle. And again, housing for offenders that have easy access to employment and case management types of services are vital. We need to create safe housing for offenders that become taxpayers, not tax takers. And we also need to invest in people as they're trying to turn their lives around. One of the things that we want to do is keep true to the original intent also of Dr. Giebink's donation of this land along 51st Street, which was originally provided to provide services to individuals that really need that helping hand up. And that's part of why the zoning and that part of it is so vital to this project, and this piece of land stands out. Again, the ice rink property, the zoning's in place. The property is already adjacent to an accredited service provider that has a proven track record. The ice rink was defunded not only because of the new Iceplex complex on the north of the city, but also there were some health risks that happened, whether it was carbon monoxide and those type of things. Again, renovating the ice rink would take a huge amount of city money, and to use this as storage versus an investment in human capital reduces the amount that the property could generate in terms of taxpayer dollars. So again, it's one of those things that I hope we move forward with. We have that opportunity. Again, Director Ketchum has really stepped up to help put those partnerships and discussions together in the next 2 months to come to the council with a plan and a way to move forward to best use this piece of property that the city owns now. Thank you.
Questions for Councilor Starr? Councilor Neisert?
Has there been any discussion about any fundraising or private dollars that could go into something like this?
Absolutely. Depending on what we choose as a partner to develop this, whether it's another unit of government, their budgets are available, obviously, but there's also funding from HUD and as well as through the South Dakota Housing Authority. So there are a number of places. Whatever firm is going to have that takes it, or whatever nonprofit takes over this piece of property, if they proceed with a housing need, are going to have some kind of fundraising plan as part of it. But for the type of housing that I'm envisioning, it's not the pretty, it's not the most accessible type of people to fundraise for. It's always fun for, or it's easier for a lot of fundraising to do babies and things that have happy outcomes. These are, it was one of the phrases that I learned from my pastor. It's easy to minister to the rich and pretty of the world. It's difficult when people have challenges. And that's where we really need to step up and help the most in need, and giving them a chance to move forward with what they're doing.
And then one more. As far as the appraisal, do we have an idea of what a cost of that would be? And mechanically, how do you make it happen? Is that something that the council has to appropriate, or you can just get done administratively? Or
no, that's a very good question, Councilor. We do have an internal real estate department as part of the city, and that's probably where the next step of the appraisal process will go. In general, or anecdotally, when you're looking at industrial property like this around Sioux Falls, the estimate is somewhere between that $5 to $6 a square foot, which would put us at somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000 for the valuation of the property if it's bare land.
Councilor Selberg.
Thank you. Yeah, that's one of the questions I was going to have. I mean, obviously you haven't had an appraisal done, but I was kind of curious if you'd had any commercial professionals come in and kind of give their ideas on what the value would be. Because I mean, I'm not an appraiser, but I kind of do that with houses. So I was just curious what kind of dollar figure they were talking about, or
absolutely. And then we've also had some discussions with a couple of real estate development companies in town, trying to lay out the land, how it would actually work. Of how many housing units you could put on it based on, to try to do some of those preliminary budgets. But really a big part of my effort and several other counselors has been, do we need this piece of property at this point in time? Does it make sense to use it in Dr. Giebink's donation originally, and a lot of the land in the whole area along 51st Street. There's a lot of human services organizations that are already part of that area, so it makes sense. So again, we're kind of at that part of the process where first getting to that point that would we ever open this as a parks property or an ice type of facility, and I think we've come to a pretty good conclusion that that probably isn't going to happen. So the next step is finding the appraisal, finding the next step, and putting the plans together to make a really informed decision as a council. So it'll require an ordinance and a resolution depending how we do that, and we have several options to do that. So hope that answered your question.
Did, thank you.
Councilor Staley?
So you're proposing that it stays, that property where the ice rink is would be a Glory House usage? Or are you up for?
We're still at a point where we can take a look at whether it's the Glory House that can expand into that property, but there has been some interest from for-profit companies in the piece of land, as well as there's been interest from other units of government now. So what we want to do is maybe take a look at what the best use of that is, and using some of the administration resources. Again, Director Ketchum has really stepped forward to kind of lead some of that solicitation and discussion. So
because I know before you were talking about perhaps doing a contract for deed with the Glory House, and or maybe a lease similar to what we did with the Elmwood Golf Course, letting them expand onto that property?
We've taken a look. We've worked with the city attorney's office. Danny Brown has done a really nice job of helping us lay out some of those options. But till we kind of go through the process of exactly, for me, the big hurdle was getting past, are we going to use this piece of property? Do we have a need for it as a city, has been really the hurdle that we wanted to get past, or that I wanted to get past at this point. And I think we've crossed that hurdle with the administration, that there isn't a need through the departments and through the city using that piece of property. So the next real step is whether it's the Glory House, whether it's Lifescape, whether it could possibly be a opportunity with the county, like a safe house type of program. There's a lot of, I guess, the dreaming part of it and finding that best use is really the next step where we're at. So being able to have this discussion publicly has had some people come forward and say, hey, maybe we have an idea or another idea. So trying to, whether it's a contract for deed, there are a number of ways to surplus the property, but that's kind of a horse or a cart before the horse until we determine what we really want to do to get the best use for our citizens out of this piece of property. Very good question.
Councilor Erickson?
Thank you, and I have a couple questions, and maybe Danny needs to answer them depending on what you think. So my question is has it been looked at as potentially, if the city sees a different, the administration sees a different vision for this area. Glory House is already there. They clearly need to expand. Has it been looked upon at doing possibly a land swap? Hey, if you want to go ahead and develop this, go ahead and take ours. We'll swap you some land somewhere else based on zoning and conditional use permits and all those fun things once that's approved. Is that an option, or is that, ideally they're already there, so it makes sense to put them right next door, but I just was curious about another option.
That's a very good question, and if Attorney Brown wouldn't mind answering that. It isn't necessarily one of the options that we looked at, or that I looked at when we first started discussing this, because really there's a couple of options. We can donate the piece of property to a nonprofit organization, or we could have it appraised and sell it at 90%, but then open it up to the public. So there are those normal procedures that a government entity like the city would go through to do that. I don't believe a land swap or that kind of proposal was ever suggested, at least doing that. But Mr. Chair, would it be all right for Attorney Brown to answer that if he would?
Thank you, Councilor. Danny Brown, Assistant City Attorney. That option hasn't been discussed, but it's certainly something that we could look into. If they had land that we wanted to swap with, it's a possibility.
I just wasn't sure as far as it opening up as an option, that if the city is not interested in potentially selling or surplusing that area, they need to expand in where could they go? What would that option be that's accessible to public transit and jobs and housing? And, there'd obviously be more expense for the Glory House than to have to develop as well. So I was just curious about that. The other thing that I'm curious about, as far as purchasing the land. We can't just sell it directly to them. I'm just a little cautious as we just surplus things and let's just sell it for $1. Let's give it away. There's just some concern with that.
Yeah, all good questions. And when you're dealing with real estates, there's a lot of different laws, and it depends on what kind of entity you're, selling the real estate to or gifting the real estate to. And if you sell it, there's conditions on how much you can sell it for, and it has to be at least 90%. If it's a nonprofit, you can gift to a nonprofit. But if you gift to a nonprofit, there's conditions. The property has to be used for charitable purposes or humanitarian purposes. And so if they're going to keep it, it has to be continued to be used in that way. So there's lots of options available. It depends on what entity ultimately gets it and whether it's sold, gifted, or exchanged. But you really have a lot of options available. It's just whatever you feel is best for the citizens.
So if I can have one more question then.
Okay.
I'm quick. So my other question, the fundraising was brought up, and I would maybe just respectfully disagree a little bit that it's a very, very important issue in our community that maybe it's not as hot item to donate to, but if you don't try, you don't know. And so I feel that the Glory House or whoever those involved certainly need to try to do some sort of campaign to raise those funds to build, operate, buy, whatever it is. And I know that's not that's just my little statement, but if you don't try, you don't know. And so I'm curious as far as what real estate laws would apply that if, say, it's going to be gifted, can we require them to match a certain dollar amount? Can we do any of those kinds of things? How does that work? I'm a firm believer of putting a little skin in the game.
Well, it's a good question. What you have to remember is if you're gifting, then you're giving it to somebody.
Right.
So the more conditions you put on, the less of a gift it looks like.
True.
When you do gift, there are conditions. It has to be used and maintained as a public purpose, humanitarian purpose, or charitable purpose. So those are some kind of strings attached to a gift. But if you say, I'm giving you this, but you have to come up with $50,000, then maybe it's not a gift anymore.
Councilor Staley.
Then what's blocking us from just gifting this?
Well, procedurally, you just have to comply with state law, and you can gift real estate to any nonprofit with those conditions. You have to pass a resolution. You have to determine the property is...
The council then, it would be up to us.
Right. It would have to be an initiated action brought to the council, and you would take the action and do that.
Councilor Neisert.
If you were to gift, you said that there's strings attached that has to be used for a certain purpose. Is that a cloud the title, or is there a reversion? So in 20 years, would it go back to the city if it was extinguished?
Essentially be called a reverter. It would be on the deed itself, and it would say this property is conveyed to this entity subject to the use of the property consistent with, and we could state the statute and put in plain language. It would have to be used for charitable, public purpose or humanitarian purpose or accommodation. And then after 25, 50 years, if that purpose was no longer being enforced and it came to the attention of the city council, then they could act on it. A reverter does not expire by lapse of time unless you put a lapse of time on it, but by our state law, it wouldn't have a time limit on it. So if you gave it to them, they'd have to keep it for that use. The new owner would have to keep it for that use.
You could put it into perpetuity, essentially.
Correct, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I believe I misunderstood one of Councilor Erickson's questions, because as part of this process, we've also worked with Director Cooper looking at the city and saying, if it was the Glory House, where else in Sioux Falls would they expand? Where, back to that, not in my backyard, but at the same time, where would the zoning fit? And when you look at a map of the city of Sioux Falls, there aren't a lot of neighborhoods saying, please put this, the best term in this whole process that I heard, and I believe it was someone from the Glory House used this term, was they are proposing a 3-quarter house. So instead of a halfway house, this turns into maybe that three-quarter house where you still have access to services and the things that help you turn your life around after you've left their program. But it would also allow other people that have a hard time finding housing in the community as well. This location has great access to public transportation. It has access to jobs. 80+% of the people who are at the Glory House right now are employed. And when you think about that in this economy, you think, wow, that's still, 12, 13%, 17%, whatever you want to say, isn't employed. But these are people that are directly out of prison, that have felony convictions, but are able to start turning their life around. So I think I answered your question incorrectly. We have looked at other locations. The board of the Glory House has looked around the community, and they've had some land deals that were preliminary that have fallen through even in the last few months because they didn't know whether this is going to be an option. And the clock is ticking because as we spend thousands of dollars providing help to people, we're watching them after they're completed the program at the Glory House. There's no place for them to go. So we start seeing them at the Bishop Dudley. We start seeing them at the other locations in town where they're asking for help. So we want to do this right. I'm not pushing to do this faster than we should, but at the same time, there are lives that are being affected every day that are not able to capitalize on the help they've already received, that we've invested thousands of dollars as a society to do that as well. So there is still some time pressure to move this ahead as quickly as we can at the same time to find those solutions.
And for that reason, I'm going to suggest that Councilor Starr, you be the point of contact on this and you run with it. If other councilors have questions or something or have an idea, rather than run with it themselves, please check with Councilor Starr to see what that is so that we can keep things centralized. And I know that'll speed up the situation more than if we have 6 others that's running in different directions on this one project. And then I would appreciate if you keep leadership appraised of that along with everybody else. Okay. One last reminder that next week's council meeting is on Monday, and informational is on Monday the 17th. And one other thing, tomorrow morning we do have a joint meeting with the counties. And so I would urge you to set your alarms a little earlier than usual maybe and come hear what's going on.